Long ago, in Camelot or whatever, King Arthur gathered the bravest knights in all the land around his majestic round table, the roundest table the realm had ever seen. This wasn't just a furniture choice, it was a symbol of camaraderie, of unity, of mutual respect, of knights who attentively listened to each other talking about dragons and sword stuff. Well, guess what? I've summoned a new round table. But instead of knights in shining armor, I got a bunch of retro nerd YouTubers who probably aren't wearing pants. Instead of legendary quests, we're talking about emulation, and instead of a sword and a stone, there's probably a Mew Mini lodged in a couch cushion somewhere. This is the Retro Roundtable, a sacred council of nerds where no opinion is too obscure, no take is too spicy, and no game is too dusty. Welcome to Season 2, my friend, and I got a whole thing planned for us this year. Each episode tackling a retro gaming emulation question so important it could very well shape the fate of the kingdom. Or at least mildly entertain you for 20 minutes. And oh baby, do I have a star-studded cast for you today. Check it out, we have Mr. Sujano, Stubbs from Retro Handhelds, Adin Walls, Clef from Game Tech Talk, Bob Wulff from Wulff Den, your cool Uncle Marisa, Russ from Retro Game Corps, ETA Prime, Izzy Nobre, Chase Brogan, and me, TechDweeb. Hello! In this first episode, we're here to tackle the most important question facing the world today. What makes a game a retro game? Kind of important to figure out that first, you know? And to make sure I'm not picking favorites, let's add some spicy randomness to the process and pick some names from the toque of randomness. This is my actual hat, by the way. When I'm not wearing it, we call it the toque of randomness. Let's see who we get to start with today. The one and only Mr. Sujano, welcome!
Oh hey, I didn't even see you over there. How are you doing?
Whoa, slow down there, Mr. Rock, Lake Rock, Mr. Lake Rock. All I need to know is, what makes a game retro to you?
The official Sujano definition of retro is really whatever you want it to be. I mean, you can take a look at games that are no longer in production, maybe systems that are no longer in production, but at the same time, then you could say maybe the PS4 is considered retro. So really, it's such a broad term. I don't really police that kind of thing. If you want to call anything retro, I'm okay with that. Unless you're calling the PS5 or the Nintendo Switch 2 retro, in which case that might not be the right answer. On a side note to that though, as time goes on, when are we going to start talking about vintage or historic or introducing even further terms? I mean, we've got some games that are super old now, games from the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was mesmerized by the nature.
I don't know what you're doing, man. It's a beautiful day out here. Get outside the basement, enjoy some nature.
All right, fine then. I will. Next up, it's gonna be, no way, Clef from Game Tech Talk.
Hey.
How you doing, buddy? All right, let's hear it. What even is a retro game? Help us out here.
What is retro for me? I mean, for sure certain eras of consoles and games are definitely more retro because they come from a time that is from many years ago, logically. But if there is one thing for me that defines what retro is, and is a pretty substantial and important element to be part of, is just the nostalgia. Something cannot be retro if it doesn't have that nostalgia element. It's not the only thing, but for me, it's the most important thing. It's the thing that sends me back in a different time. And that time can be 10 years ago, it can be 20, 30 years ago, but it needs to have that element. At least if I did not experience it 30 years ago, to at least have some of those elements that evokes a certain era and a certain time. That's definitely what retro means for me.
All right, Hat, give us someone good. ETA Prime, he's better than good. He's like really, really good. Welcome, buddy.
What's going on?
I'm so glad you're here. And the people need to know, Mr. Prime, what makes a game retro to you?
Games that I personally used to play when I was young, and I completely understand that there's people out there that think it needs to be 2D, they think it needs to be pixel art, but we're in 2025 right now. Some of my favorite games released on PS2 and GameCube, they're over 20 years old now, so I do consider those retro. And, you know, kind of just thinking back in my head, whenever I hear somebody say retro game, first thing that comes to mind to me is Super Nintendo, because that's what I started out on, that's what I grew up with, and I just kind of always go back to the SNES.
Entering the arena now, it's Stubbs! Stubbs from Retro Handheld. The crowd goes wild. Ah, yeah, Stubbs. Ah. Hey, Stubbs.
Hi.
All right, Stubbs, let's hear it. What do you got?
I'll mail you some Stubbs nubs. $4 on Etsy.
No, not that. The question. What makes a game retro?
Now in RH, we tend to split what is retro into years. Traditionally, it's been anything over the year 2000 has been considered modern. But as we move into this next generation, and now people are saying PS3 is retro, my new kind of standard is basically anything 2010 and before, to me, means it's retro. But this is a moving target. For instance, a game that I would say is modern could be Skyrim or Grand Theft Auto 5. These are modern games, right? No. If you ask Gen Z or whatever the new kids on the block are, whatever they're called, they would say, yeah, those are retro games. And I would say, I am so old. But really, I mean, it's the games that I grew up with. NES, SNES, PlayStation 1, PlayStation Portable? No, see, to me, that's still modern. That's still like, to me, that was my adult life. I was an adult around 2003. So anything after that, really, like, come on. That's not retro. That's crazy. PSP? Pfft, come on. PS2? Get out of here. So yeah, to me, it kind of ends at N64, PS1, and let's say Game Boy Advance. That's about as retro as I want to admit to.
And next up we have Bob Wulff from Wulff Den. Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Lay it on us, Mr. Wulff. We're ready. What makes a game retro to you?
This question gets people really heated because it forces people to face their own mortality. But to me, retro just means it's on a console that was more than 2 generations ago. So you have the current generation, you have the next generation, you have the last generation, and then you have retro. So you got future generation, current generation, last generation, retro. And that's it. And that's all there is. And you are, in fact, old.
All right, Hat, who are you giving us? TechDweeb, that's me. Yeah, it is. All right, Dweeb, give us your answer. What makes a game retro? 25 years. What? 25 years. Games older than 25 years are retro. Not 25 years old, not retro. That's it? Yeah, I guess. Why? Oh, I was just thinking, we're trying to put on a show here, so, well, that's my answer. What do you want me to say? I've actually given this a good amount of thought, because I used to think there was a cutoff point. I think my previous cutoff point was the Xbox 360 and PS3, that era, since most of the games from that era feel like the games we have today. The graphics and the gameplay weren't being held back. They all have the same control schemes that we have today. The games were all decked out with online features and downloadable content, just like today. And also, most of the games from then came out on PC, and most of the ones that didn't have since gotten remakes or remasters, so it sort of felt like the games from before that time were from a retro era, but all the games after that time are from the modern era. And feel more like modern games. But then I realized that that's kind of short-sighted, because that basically means that there's an end to retro games. That kids that grew up with an Xbox 360 don't deserve to have retro games. But then when they become adults and they're playing the games they played when they were kids, their experience playing those old games and reliving those old memories are the same for us playing Super Nintendo or whatever. Plus, console generations are so wishy-washy. Who knows how long they last? It's so different every generation, and also that ignores the complexity of PC gaming. So it makes more sense to me that there's just a generic age of how old the game should be. And I think 25 years makes the most sense, because that's just enough time for a game to come out, and then a kid to get the game and play it, and then for that kid to become an adult, like a late 20s, early 30s adult, and then they want to replay those old games from when they were a kid for that retro experience. 25 years. It's universal, and it applies at any point from now until the end of time. You know what? Now that you put it like that, I'm with you. Well, I'm glad we agree. And maybe after the show, we can get together and find out what else we agree on. Ah, the ancient scrolls whisper their name, and the hat confirms it. Arise, Izzy Nobre!
Hey,
All right, Izzy, don't let the internet down. What's your take?
I think there's a lot of things that we all associate with retro games, like pixelated graphics or a chiptune soundtrack. For some people, I think it's a specific cutoff. So let's say 20 years. I don't like that one so much because when I was, let's say 10, right, in the mid 90s, 10 years ago was 1985, which felt like an eternity ago. When I think of 1985, I think of Back to the Future. I think all of us have certain elements that we associate with retro games. So be it the pixelated look or a chiptune soundtrack, to some, I'm sure it's going to be a cutoff time. I'm not so comfortable with that one anymore because when I was a kid and I thought of games that were 20 years old, right, in 1995, that would have been 1975. So that seemed like a pretty decent amount of time. I feel like if I was looking back at just 10 years prior in 1985, the games I would find then would be considered by 1995 standards retro by any measure. But then now, when I look back 20 years ago, that's 2005. So, but at the same time, I don't think a lot of people would consider those games retro. I mean, I do, I certainly do, but I don't think everybody else is on board with calling, let's say, Shed of the Colossus retro. I guess that changes the older I get.
What's that you say, Hat? Our next guest is my cool uncle Marisa. Amazing choice. Hey, Marisa.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. The mic is yours, Marisa. What's a retro game, really?
When I first got into retro games, trying to define it was kind of insane because it just made me feel panicked and old when people would say like the Wii is retro. But I've decided that the definition, for me at least, is when the publishing companies and the company behind the console stop supporting it in terms of publishing games for it. So for example, the PS5 exists, but the PS4 still gets games. And so I wouldn't say PS4 is retro. However, I would say PS3 has become retro because it still does get updates in the form of we want to make sure the Blu-ray drive continues to be licensed and stuff, but no one's actively publishing games on a big scale for it. I feel like that's the least depressing definition.
Choo choo. Next stop on the Retro Express, it's Russ from Retro Game Corps. Hey, buddy.
Hey, what's up, man?
Oh, a whole bunch of stuff. I got a new pillow. I had to get rid of the old one. It was kind of falling apart. But it's always weird, getting rid of an old pillow. It sort of feels like getting rid of a piece of your history, Like how many pillows do we actually have in life? One less for me.
You got a point there. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, a few people do. Oh, right, the question. What do you think, Russ? What makes a game a retro game?
To classify a game as retro for me doesn't really have to do anything with like the age of the game or the age that I was when I first played the game or necessarily what console it was on specifically, but rather the level of effort required to play that game today. So for example, if playing that game requires you to emulate it on something else, or if you have to go into your closet and like dig out an old console and hook it up to your more modern TV, and maybe the hookups don't work anymore, you have to buy a special adapter, for me that is all a retro gaming experience just because it's not something that's super plug and play today. So I wouldn't classify it at a certain console level. For example, some people might think that Xbox 360 games are retro and some may not, but I would argue that if you have like a modern Xbox already and you can just go into the Xbox store and actually play your Xbox 360 game, that doesn't feel very retro to me. But if it's a game that requires you to like dump the data from the disc and then play it in an emulator, then yeah, that's totally a retro experience. And so that's kind of how I think about it in my own mind. It's like whether or not I can play it on its own natively without any extra equipment, or if it does require an extra little bit of effort to actually play it. And all that stuff to me is a retro experience.
The Sacred Hat calls upon Chase Brogan. Step forth.
TechDweeb, what's going on, man?
Oh man, it's good to see you, dude. Thanks for being here. And thanks for sharing your wisdom. Let's hear it.
So what makes a game retro? I love this question. I'm going to come in with a hot take. I think that people are going to definitely, not everybody's going to be against me on this, but I think the majority of people probably will. So for me, I have a science for what makes a game retro, and it's got to be 2 consoles removed from what is current. So for Xbox, we have the S and X right now. For PlayStation, we have the PS5. So 2 consoles removed would be Xbox 360, so not the Xbox One, that's only one console removed. Xbox 360 today, I believe, is retro. PS3, one console removed from today. PS5 is retro. A lot of people are going to push back on that. They think that it's got to be like old school from years and years ago. I think that that's just because people are afraid to admit that they're getting old. You're getting old, I'm getting old. We're all getting old with this stuff. But I firmly believe that it's two consoles removed makes it retro. That puts it around what, like when did the Xbox 360 come out? I want to say like 2006. I mean, that's almost 20 years ago now. Almost 20 years ago, the Xbox 360 was released. Or maybe even 20 years ago. I forget exactly what year it was released, but that's retro, guys. That is definitely retro. PS3, a little bit later, still, that's retro. That's retro. If there's games released for the last console and also this current console, like there's games for Xbox One and Xbox S and X. There's games for PS4 that are also made for PS5. Because there's crossover there, that's not retro. It's got to be at least two consoles removed. Final answer, Xbox 360 is retro. PS3 is retro.
Last one. That means it's gonna be, Adin Walls. Hey, buddy. Adin!
Oh, hey.
Yeah, hey. Oh, okay. Come on, take us home, Adin. What makes a game a retro game?
Retro, when I started this, I must be honest, when I started making these videos, for me, I was just under the impression that retro was Famicom. And that's changed, definitely for me, because retro is whatever gives you a nostalgic feeling. I know, for instance, Russ from Retro Game Core in one of my episodes said he plays SNES because he never owned it. It's old, it's retro. He remembers friends having it, but he never got an opportunity to play it. And so that's also retro, because retro is sometimes discovering something. For example, my example is Game Boy Advance. I'm going to be honest, I never knew Game Boy Advance existed until I got an Anbernic. Game Boy Advance wasn't big here in South Africa. For me, I love playing Game Boy Advance. It feels so special because it's something from the past that I never got to discover, and I'm getting to discover it for the first time. So that's retro. But essentially, retro is just a feeling that you get. When I play Street Fighter, it takes me back to a very specific moment in time. It takes me back to when I was like, I don't remember a lot from that time in my life. I was maybe 5 years old, but I just remember as a little kid standing there watching these dudes play Street Fighter, and then every now and again I'd have a 20-cent coin and I could play Street Fighter. Then it went up in price. Those feelings are priceless. One more I will share is going camping, and I'm still not 100% sure which shmup it was, but it was an olden day aeroplane, and you flew and shot stuff. And I remember at that point it was 2 rand, and I kept running back and forth to my mom and getting 2 rand coins and playing that game at a campsite. That's retro, like taking you back to these nostalgic feelings that just give you a warm, fuzzy feeling. When all the shit is happening outside, you get to pick up this little piece of technology. And that's why I think people don't always understand the scene, is that it's not about having a one and done console. It's about having a few of these consoles that just take you back to a specific memory. And for a lot of people, that's kind of priceless.
Holy jeez, those were some good answers. Everyone who took part, dang, what a freaking awesome way to start a new season of the Retro Roundtable. Thanks so much for being here, you beautiful nerds. But this is just the beginning. There are many more episodes to come. The plan is to release one a month until the end of the year, so get subscribed if you haven't yet so you don't miss those. And now it's your turn. Let us know in the comments, what makes a game retro to you? Share your wisdom with us, you glorious nerds. And from all of us at the Retro Roundtable, stay around. Stay round. That's dumb. I'll come up with something better for the next one. Probably.